How to overcome childhood trauma. We all have trauma and it affects us in ways that we don't even realize. This video is going to help you identify your trauma and tools to learn how to overcome it. Addiction, relationship issues, anxiety, depression, all of these problems can usually be traced back to childhood trauma. You don't have to let it rule your life forever. There are ways to heal childhood trauma. I'm going to show you how, and I'm going to walk you through what it's going to take. While we talk about this today, I'm going to be opening up your mind, and you might be thinking about actually addressing some of the most painful things in your life. But just watching this video is not therapy. You're going to have to step into this yourself. So hopefully by the end of this video, you'll know where to step in and where to go get the help that you need. But you're going to have to go do it yourself. Our childhood experiences affect us more than we even know. Childhood trauma is complex. When we think about trauma, we think about big life events, bad things that happen to us. But trauma can be a little more complex than that. Little subtle things can be very traumatic to us and create all kinds of problems with us. So it's important that you can self-reflect and look back on what has been traumatic to you in your life. One of the things that I've done in my career is intake assessments. I've done many intake assessments. Now, what an intake assessment is when somebody comes in for the first time and they tell me their story and they start talking about the problems in their life. They start saying, I'm struggling at work, or I have this addiction, or I'm about to get divorced and I have major relationship problems. And it's interesting because as I listen to those things, I realize all of those things are the symptoms of what's going on in their life. But what is the cause? What's underneath it all? Why are they struggling so much in those areas? And as we dig into their story, it becomes obvious. It's clear to me why those things happen. And you can connect their trauma, their specific trauma experiences, to the problems they're having now as an adult. And it's just fear running the show and creating the problems that they're still dealing with today. What is trauma? When you think about trauma, you might think about a car accident, or your parents getting divorced, or some type of major abuse that you experienced as a child. All of those things are traumatic. Those are things that really rock your world and change your life. But there's such thing as big T trauma, which are those big things, and little t trauma. Little t trauma is more subtle, but just as traumatic. And usually little t trauma is more long-term. So let me give you an example. Let's say that my mom was never emotionally connected to me. She didn't really empathize. She didn't really care to connect on an emotional level. From an outsider's point of view, you might not see this big trauma thing. But as a child, if my mom can't emotionally connect to me, that's going to affect me deeply. That's traumatic to me. That neglect and that lack of connection really matters to me. If my dad's a workaholic and he loves me, but he's always gone, that's little t trauma. I don't have connection with my dad. I'm neglected from my dad. And so that affects me. What does that mean about me? I'm going to start to do things to try to compensate for those feelings of neglect in my life. That's an example of little t trauma. Trauma is life experiences that lead to fear and shame. So if you've experienced something and then you start to try to do something because you're in a lot of fear, you're having a trauma response. So you can look at your responses and your behaviors and usually trace it back to some kind of trauma in your life. Trauma leads to beliefs about the world around you, and it also leads to identities about who you are. So if you experience certain things, if dad is a workaholic or if mom is neglecting you, you start to believe they must be neglecting me because I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy of love, or I'm not that important. And that's where you start to develop identities about who you are because of the experiences that you've had. These beliefs and these identities actually feed themselves. So if I start feeling like I'm not lovable or I'm not important, I'm going to start showing up unlovable and unimportant in my life. I'm going to start noticing evidence in my life of that narrative to be true. And so I'm going to reinforce those beliefs about what the trauma has told me. And over the years, it becomes so automatic, such an identity that is just who I am. And it can be really hard to undo because it's so subconscious at that point and so automatic. Acting on your trauma fears will never heal your trauma. It's what we attempt to do because we have fear of abandonment or neglect, and we do these things. It never helps you overcome it. In fact, it reinforces those shame-based, fear-based beliefs. So I'm going to share with you what actually does work to overcome your trauma. But before I do, remember to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I talk about trauma all the time. First off, notice the outcomes of your life. If there's chaos being created, if you're struggling in relationships, if you're ending up in addiction, notice what's happening in your life and ask yourself a question. Why? What's underneath that? What decisions have I made? What behaviors have I had that have created that in my life, and why? What fear is there that's driving this destructive outcome in my life? Get to know your fears well and actually love and appreciate your trauma responses. What I mean by that is, instead of telling yourself that you shouldn't be acting that way or that you need to change, notice that you are and say to yourself, I understand why I'm showing up in fear. I can see what I'm trying to do here. And I appreciate that I'm trying to protect myself from this fear. But I'm going to choose not to act that way anymore. It's much easier to change the behavior if you accept the behavior first. Next, practice self-compassion. Do some inner child work. Now, when I say inner child, you might think, what does that even mean? What that means is for you to actually connect to that piece of you that's very tender, and that piece of you that was not traumatized, that was you before all of these life experiences. Get to know that little person who still loves yourself, who can still feel who you actually are. Process and reprocess the pain. Trauma is usually painful, and you can run from it forever, or you can turn and you can step into it, and you can feel it, and you can reprocess that trauma so that you don't have all the beliefs around it. You don't believe what that trauma has told you from years ago. There's good ways that you can step into that through therapy. One way that I'm trained in therapy is through eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. I know that's a big word. I know that's a lot. EMDR. It's a way for you to go into your trauma, to not get re-traumatized, but actually reprocess what that trauma has told you so that you don't have the behaviors and the outcomes that you're getting in your life. You go process that pain, you feel it, but you allow your soul to heal. You allow that inner child inside of yourself to actually heal and to feel peace again. Sometimes we get so stuck in our identities and our trauma that we can't even see other possibilities. If I just think that I'm broken and I'm not lovable, it might be hard for me to believe that I am lovable and that I'm whole. It's important that you open your mind up to new possibilities, other things that you can see. And you might not believe it at first, but at least be open to new things rather than what the trauma has told you about yourself. This is why therapy is so powerful and so helpful. A therapist can help you see some of these things that you can't see yourself. They can take you into the pain and they can help you reprocess it. So they help you get more conscious about how your trauma is affecting you. Lastly, and one of the most difficult things to do, is to start to act against what your trauma is telling you to do. So act opposite of that fear and that shame. If trauma is saying you're not enough, then act like you're enough. Step into being a courageous person who's not letting the fear control your life anymore. If you have a lot of trauma and you have a lot of fear, then you might have some relationship problems. It might be difficult to connect with your partner. So check out my video. I'm going to help you with this. My video is Why is Empathy So Hard? And as you deal with your trauma, you'll see that empathy actually becomes easier as well. So check out that video here.